mention that the recommendations that are contained in the book will help decision makers and policy makers in terms of addressing the challenge of DIDs. Everyone, I think, that was invited here, we believe you are in one way or the other involved in dealing with land management issues or issues to do with displacements, and we believe you are all critical stakeholders in terms of addressing these challenges that we face as a country.
There are at least 4 key issues that need to be addressed. Free, prior, and informed consent. Free, prior, and informed consent, which we depict as FPIC. It is important, ladies and gentlemen, to have meaningful participation of the affected communities in decision-making processes. From the planning to the implementation stage, it is not just about consultation, but about gaining broad consent without coercion, intimidation, or manipulation. B, fair and comprehensive compensation. Compensation refers to financial payments, replacement of structures and assets, or any other form of support in order to compensate for any damages or losses incurred by the affected people. There is a need to harmonize approaches and define minimum requirements for such processes. This includes replacement or compensation for the loss of land, which for many communities is the most valuable asset in terms of their livelihoods. Zimbabwe has made concerted efforts to redistribute land, but have we done enough to secure the land rights of our people in the communal and resettlement areas? Displacement is often reduced to the issue of physical relocation or loss of individual assets. However, people's livelihoods may be negatively affected even if they are not physically displaced. For example, if the environment is destroyed, and if people are physically displaced, they may also experience loss of collective social, economic, and cultural assets, such as access to social facilities such as schools, clinics, shops, just to add a few. This includes natural resources and heritage sites. As such, there is need for comprehensive impact assessments and risk mitigation plans and clear procedures and minimum requirements for such. Where natural resources are dispossessed and commodified, then the affected people should also benefit from this. Instead of once-off compensation payments, there is a need for shareholder agreements and profit-sharing schemes to support the socio-economic development of the affected people in the long term. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears displacement, relocation, and compensation issues are too often an afterthought. We realize they are not properly planned, communicated, and funded in advance. No. Therefore, it is crucial, we believe, that investment agreements and development project plans and budgets consider the social costs of the project from the planning phase. Negotiations with the affected people and impact assessments should happen, and agreements and plans for resettlement and compensation should be in place before a project commences.
There are 8 land rights which matter to any kind of land in the world. And if you can grasp those land rights and then be able to define them for any tenure system, then you begin to understand what land tenure is. So the land rights are, number 1, in terms of occupation, who's got the right to occupy the piece of land? Number 2, use rights. What can you use the piece of land for? Can you build on it? Can you crop? Can you bury your dead? Those rights have to be clear. Number 3, transfer rights. Can you hypothecate? Can you bequeath to your children and grandchildren? Can you sell? Can you mortgage? Those rights have to be clear for any piece of land. Number 4 is exclusion rights. For Eurocentric systems, exclusion rights are the only rights that matter. Who is excluded from enjoying the same rights? But for Africans, there is both exclusion and inclusion rights, because my son who is born in Johannesburg and is South African can still come back to my home and claim inclusion rights. Those rights have to be clear for every land tenure system. Number 5 is the spatial rights. From what point to what point to what point do your rights apply? It has to be clear and it has to be agreed with the local authorities and government. Number 6 is the temporal rights. So for how long are you going to have these rights? Is it in infinity or for a certain period of time? And those rights have to be clear. Number 7, what are your procedural rights? If somebody is going to violate those rights that we've just talked about, what rights do you have under the sanction of the state machinery to defend those rights? Okay. And then finally is access rights. So if you want to increase your amount of land or get new land that you don't have, what rights do you have to get new land? So if we are able to define those rights in any land tenure system, the chances that the 3 other elements that guarantee those rights will find an easy job, because the other 3 elements are the governance system, the land administration system, and the legislative framework and laws that make it possible to allocate those rights and define the governance and land administration systems. And I can safely say that the statutory laws, which are basically Roman Dutch laws, have codified those in law, one way or another. The customary rights were never codified in law. those rights, if they are going to be taken away, because the state always, everywhere, the state always has rights to then compulsorily acquire land, whether it's freehold land or it's customary land. But then the state follows certain procedures. And what I find is that there's ambiguity in the way public land is defined, not just in Zimbabwe, but in Africa as a whole. So I have always said, and I've argued with other experts on this, that public land is the broader definition of all land that is held in trust by the state and by the president. When the state goes ahead and alienates pieces of that land for management by the state because it's needed for military purposes or research, etc., then it's state-managed land. But when it comes to public land, which is held under customary rights, it is actually public land held in trust by the head of state and government for use by the public and managed by those who are on that land. So this is where the ambiguity is, that the law as it exists now is ambiguous enough to allow the state to say it's state land. Therefore, if you have customary land rights, you don't have any rights really. It's just state land. You are there at the mercy of the state. Alienate the land and allocate it for private use. As opposed to the Constitution making it clear that customary land rights are held in trust by the president and state for use by the people who already have rights on it. Okay, so this is the challenge in interpretation of what public land is and what state land is. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I love the way that this book really, I mean, the CCMT to me is the ideal, brilliant framework of working on conflict issues, especially when it comes to land and land-based resources. I find, as an academic myself, I find that their approach is probably one of the most balanced I've seen anyway. They will give all entities the benefit of the doubt, but they will fearlessly and boldly examine the extent to which ordinary citizens' rights are being respected. So, Father Mukonori, I say your organization and how you are approaching these issues is not just really brilliant, but has a lot of integrity and carries the chances of all entities, including government, respecting the work that you're doing. So in conclusion, I would say, when I look at the Second Republic and the new dispensation, it's really about pushing the boundaries of the legislation and administration of the legislation. So we are failing at this point in time to translate the Constitution and amend parts of the Constitution which are ambiguous when it comes to customary rights, that when we come down to the laws, such as the Communal Lands Act and the Traditional Leaders Act, that it's easier to clarify what those land rights are for those who hold land under customary law. And then to go further and then say, here's how that's governed and administered in a way that protects people's rights. And when it comes to compulsory acquisition, they can be sufficiently not just compensated in the way that Professor Mukonori was talking about, but in reality, at local level, especially with the talk of devolution, when we come to provincial and district level, make it possible for provinces and districts to understand that they will always be need to address issues of compulsory compensation, compulsory acquisition and compensation. The provinces and districts under devolution should always have a budget in place to deal with compensation issues. And more importantly, when we get to community level, it's not always that the local authorities only compensate in monetary terms. There are many, many other ways of compensating local communities. For a start, just going through some of the suggested procedures that Father Mukonori went through, just going through with them, that's a good starting point for already surfacing some of the potential solutions to the problem. For instance, community people in rural areas, they have so many options and suggestions for how they can be assisted to move from their present situation, which is being compulsorily acquired, to a new situation. It's not always a monetary issue, actually. There are lots of other ways to compensate them and to make their lives just as comfortable as they were or better when they move.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, these are the contributing authors to this book. Thank you so much for your input, and we hope, like I said, it will inspire us to find solutions to this challenge that we are discussing about. So you can now take your seats. Thank you.